Welcome back to our lecture. In this hands-on segment, I want to experiment a little bit with the Simple Queue Service, SQS. And in order to experiment with the service, what I'm going to do is I will set up an SQS queue, and then I've developed a little Python-based application that I'm going to run on my local workstation. And this Python application allows me to simulate different services. I can simulate a service that is acting as a publisher, and I can simulate a service that's acting as a consumer. And what I want you to really pay attention to is how this visibility timeout works, how a consuming application can pull a message from the queue, and if it doesn't delete that message within the visibility timeout window, that message will then reappear back on the queue. Now, it might be a little challenging for you to follow this particular hands-on segment because you need to set up the application on your local workstation. That's not something I necessarily would expect you to do. But if you are interested in following along, the application code is actually located in the repository, and it's located in a directory called demo/SQS, and the Python application is called sqsapp.py. And this application has some library dependencies that have to be installed, mainly Boto3, which is a Python library that implements the AWS SDK. Okay, so I'm going to go into the AWS Management Console, and I want to go to the SQS console. So I'll type in SQS and select Simple Queue Service. And I'll get started by launching a standard queue. I'm going to name this queue. I'll just give it a name of something like My Queue. And it's running in US East, North Virginia. And I want this to be a standard queue. Remember, there's two types of queues, the standard queue, and you can also create FIFO queues. I'm going to just use the standard queue, and I'll click on the configure queue link. I'm not going to make any changes here, but I just want you to see that you can change some of the queue attributes, like the default visibility timeout, which is 30 seconds. You can change that. You can change the message retention period. Currently, the default's to 4 days. After 4 days, it'll just simply expire or delete messages that are older than that retention period. I can change the maximum message size, delivery day, delay, and so on. We're just going to keep all of these default settings in place, and I will create the queue. We now have a new message queue that has been created for us. You can see that the message queue has no messages in it. Under messages available, it says 0. There are no messages yet in that queue. The most important thing here, the most important attribute is the SQS endpoint, which is this URL that is provided when I create my message queue. I need that URL in order to create messages, to push messages into the queue. Okay, I'm going to go to my command line application, and I'm in that demo directory where the SQS Python application is located. If I just run that Python without any attributes, it will give me some usage information. I need to pass in a command. There are 3 commands that are available, and then there are some attributes I can pass. The most important attribute is the URL at the endpoint address for that SQS queue, which I've copied already in my clipboard. So what I'm going to do is I'll just run the command, the sysapp application, and I'm going to use the status command, and that's going to give me some basic information about my SQS queue. And I'll paste in the endpoint address for the queue. I gotta make sure I spell this correctly. There we go. So I run the status command and it tells me that my queue has no messages in it and there are no messages not visible, which is kind of a double negative there, but it basically means that none of the messages in the queue have been pulled by a consumer. And when those messages are pulled, they're not actually deleted from the queue. They're just sort of invisible because the visibility timer is running. Okay, let's create a message and put it on the queue. I can use the same application to do that. My SQS app, Python application, serves as both a publisher and a consumer. And to simulate a publisher, I'm going to use the send message command along with the message attribute. I'm going to send a message of just something like, this is my first message. So I send a message and it gives me a message ID. It's been written to the queue. If I do run the status command, it tells me that now there is one message in the queue currently. If I go to the dashboard and refresh, it says the same thing. So it says there's one message that is available. It's sitting in the queue. Now, what's going to happen to that message? Well, it's going to sit in that queue waiting for a service to make a request and pull that message from the queue. It'll sit in the queue for 4 days. After 4 days, then the message will automatically expire, be deleted by the SQS service. Let's go in and use our SQS application again. And this time, we're going to simulate receiving a message or pulling the message from the queue. We're pretending that now we are a consumer application and we want to receive a message that is in the queue. We run the receive message and we get this JSON object back. The body of the message is the message you saw me type in. So this is my first message, it's the body, it's been received. If I look at status, it says that there are no messages in the queue, but there is one message that's not visible. If I do a refresh over here, you see it says messages in flight 1, messages unavailable 0. So the message isn't available in the queue. Well, now it is. After 30 seconds or so, now there's one message that's available in the queue again. Let me go and retrieve that message. So what just happened? Why is that message available in the queue again? Well, I pretended I was a consumer service pulling that message from the queue. I didn't actually do anything with the message. I grabbed it. I didn't do any processing. I didn't delete the message. I just kind of hung on to it. And after the visibility timer expired, then that message reappeared again in the queue. So I'm going to pull the message from the queue again. So I've retrieved the message. Let me try to retrieve it again. Oh, there are no more messages found in the queue. So we retrieve that one message. So there are no messages in that queue. If I do a refresh, you see message 1 in flight. I can't retrieve any more messages because there are no messages in that queue. However, if I wait long enough, I'll keep the status going, you'll see that now the message is back in the queue. That visibility timer timed out. So it's now available to us again. Okay, well, how about we get rid of that message? So we want to retrieve the message. We're going to delete it right away. So we're going to retrieve the message, and I can add the delete flag to delete the message right away. So I've retrieved the message, and now if I do status, you see that there are no messages in the queue. There are no messages that are not visible in the queue. So I retrieved the message, and I actually did something with it. In this case, I just deleted it. I could have done some processing or whatever, but I deleted the message from the queue, and so now it's gone from the queue forever. If I go back and I can send some messages, I'm going to say, this is my first message. So I've created another message. I'm going to say, this is my second message. And I could go on and on and on, just creating messages. If I look at my queue, now you see that there are 2 messages on the queue. And if I receive a message, I can receive a message and delete it. I received a message. Notice how it says, this is my second message. So it's not pulling them in order necessarily. Pulled the second message when I did the pull. If I look at the status, and there's only 1 message left in the queue. If I do a receive and delete again, now it's pulled the very first message I had created. Look at the status, and my queue is empty. That's really all there is to the SQS service. It's fundamentally a very, very simple service. It's a message queue. It's a place where our applications and services can publish messages to, and then other services can pull those messages from the queue, process those messages, and then delete them when they're done working with them. If the service is not able to delete the message within the timeout window, then the message will reappear back on the queue, and other services can then potentially pick it back up. Well, I hope you enjoyed this hands-on segment, and I hope it gave you sort of a better sense of how an SQS queue actually works.